What's so bad about religion? I mean, religion gives people hope and security. It apparently holds answers for many of life's problems. It can provide a framework for morality and give people a sense of direction in their lives. Religious parents don't think twice about what to teach their kids about God. In many religions, parents are encouraged or even commanded to teach their children about the rules and regulations about their particular religion. The child is taught things about how the world works from the perspective of that particular religion. This isn't much of an issue if the child ends up staying in the religion for their whole lives. But what about the kid who starts to have doubts about their faith? Most of them will be encouraged to just trust God with their doubts and will be encouraged to keep believing. But there are those like me who choose to completely deconstruct their faith and ultimately make the decision to leave the religion. For some folks, leaving religion means a tremendous amount of pain and loss. Loss of family, friends, community, a belief system, and more. The culmination of these losses, as well as the impacts of years of indoctrination, can take their toll, resulting in a person developing what has been coined as religious trauma syndrome. In this video, I'll be discussing what religious trauma is, its causes, as well as some of the symptoms you see with this condition. Hey everyone, welcome to Math Magic. My name is Mav and I'm here to help you find your truth and find your magic. If content about gender identity, spirituality, and emotional wellness gets you excited, then you'll want to subscribe to this channel. Make sure you give this video a like and check out the description below to see where else you can find me or work with me. Now, let's get into the good stuff. And you can tell this is a serious conversation because I'm not standing up today, I'm sitting down, so I have some extensive notes to share with you. So where did the term religious trauma syndrome even come from? Well, the term was coined back in 2012 by a psychologist named Marlene Winell. She escaped from Christian evangelicalism and then did work to help other people who were leaving the religion. She noticed a lot of similarities with the people that she was treating, and then eventually coined the term religious trauma syndrome to put all these folks into one category. The label is useful because it's a gateway for more sufficient help with your issues. So for example, if you realize that you have the condition OCD rather than just anxiety, your providers can use interventions that are useful to that specific condition instead of just treating your anxiety symptoms. Also, labels can help people stop thinking that something is wrong with them. Naming the pain can help ease the shame. It's important to clarify that religious trauma syndrome isn't something that you can be formally diagnosed with yet, but hopefully the condition will grow in awareness and more research will be done, and eventually we'll be able to nail down some more specific diagnostic criteria. All right, so now let's define religious trauma syndrome. So religious trauma syndrome is a term that was used to describe individuals who are leaving or struggling with leaving a dogmatic, authoritarian religious system and are coping with the damage of indoctrination. So this may involve breaking away from a controlling community or lifestyle, as well as a person losing a faith that may have been very meaningful to them. This condition stems both from the chronic abuse of a suppressive religion, as well as the severing of a person from their faith. These events lead to a condition that can be kind of compared to a combination of PTSD and complex PTSD. You may have specific traumatic events from being in that religion, such as being beaten for not believing or being publicly shamed for a perceived sin, but you also might be dealing with the chronic abuse that comes with just having those dogmatic beliefs. Unfortunately, religious trauma syndrome oftentimes goes undiagnosed because individuals are just diagnosed with other conditions. This can be problematic because religious trauma syndrome can mimic the symptoms of other disorders. Here are a few examples. Post-traumatic stress disorder, clinical depression, anxiety disorders, bipolar disorder, OCD, BPD, social disorders, eating disorders, some marital or sexual dysfunction, suicidal ideation, and even things like drug and alcohol abuse. Don't get me wrong, getting treatment for these conditions will definitely be helpful. But if a clinician isn't aware of the impacts of religious trauma, the person will not get the care they need, as those other conditions that I listed don't really tell the full story. As a therapist, I know that this is a big deal. So as therapists, we're taught to be kind of open to all religions. We are aware of some of the protective factors that can come with being involved in religious groups, but some of us might not be aware of the intensely damaging effects of being in or leaving an oppressive religion. So let's talk a little bit more about the specific kinds of abuses that people in these religious groups kind of face. The issues with many of the teachings are that they are authoritarian in nature. Authoritarianism is defined as the enforcement or advocacy of strict obedience at the expense of a person's personal freedom, which implies a lack of concern for the opinions and wishes of others. Evangelical Christianity and other toxic groups teach that their way is the only way. You are required to lay aside your own interests and beliefs in order to be part of this group. One of the best ways that this is done is through the process of indoctrination. Indoctrination is the process of teaching a person to fully accept a set of beliefs uncritically or without considering other opinions or other options or other beliefs. So in order to do a really good job at indoctrinating people, you often have to reinforce those beliefs outside of the church or the religious gathering space. So parents might be required to teach their children their beliefs at home, and some children, like myself, might be sent to a religious school to be further indoctrinated. Some other factors that contribute to the development of religious trauma are that there is a suppression of normal child development. This oftentimes means that cognitive, social, emotional, and moral stages are arrested. Here are some examples of this. Natural bodily functions may be suppressed or condemned. Things like attraction, arousal, or desire. And also, you're not taught how to develop your own sense of morality. You base your morality on a religious figure or a textbook. The next factor is that there is damage done to your normal thinking and feeling abilities. So there are a couple of ways that this is accomplished. The first way is that information is often limited and controlled. We were often encouraged to limit secular content such as movies, music, and news. You are often not taught about science or the arts, and this can lead to information gaps and feeling like a fish out of water when you do end up leaving the religion. The second way is that dysfunctional beliefs are taught, and then often beliefs that contradict themselves or don't really make sense. The third way is that independent thinking is condemned. You are taught to filter all of your thoughts through the lens of that particular religion. Fourth is that you are not taught how to think critically. There is no way for you to find out if your beliefs are rational because you don't have the freedom to entertain any other options or belief systems. And the fifth way is that feelings are condemned and you are taught spiritual bypassing as a way to deal with your emotions. So for example, someone might say to you, "Oh, don't be sad. The Bible says that the joy of the Lord is your strength." So when you hear things like that, you're just expected to be okay because of that knowledge. Another factor that can contribute to the development of religious trauma syndrome is that you are taught that there is only an external locus of control, which means that there is control comes from outside of you and then not from inside of you. So within this system, there is a hierarchy of power that is enforced. You kind of have Christ, Jesus, God at the head. You will have pastors, male authority leaders kind of up there as well. Then you have like a father figure, mother figure, and then the children are kind of at the bottom. Another thing that happens is that you're taught that power is not within you, that you are completely powerless to do anything on your own, and that only those who are appointed by God have some power and can actually guide you. So within this framework, knowledge is revealed to you and not discovered. You can't really go and find answers out for yourself. And you also wouldn't want to find any answers out for yourself because you're taught that the self is not a reliable or good source. So you're taught to mistrust yourself because you are inherently sinful and desperately wicked. We also have to consider the physical, sexual, and emotional abuse as a result of patriarchal power and ideals. So corporal punishment is condoned in the Bible. So many parents will use this as a way to teach their kids. It's done with the mindset of, I'm spanking you and it's for your own good, and this hurts me more than it hurts you, which is ridiculously harmful. We also know that LGBTQIA plus people are condemned and that many people are forced into the closet. The other issue that's important to recognize is that unhealthy sexual views can cause adults and even children in that religion to harm others, and also creates a lot of sexual shame in those who leave the religion. The last factor that I want to touch on is the teaching of the doctrine of original sin and eternal punishment. Now, this factor is specific to Christianity, but I hope that you find it helpful regardless. The doctrines of original sin and eternal damnation cause a ton of psychological distress. You are taught that you are guilty and completely responsible for your sin. This sin condemns you to hell, to eternal punishment. The issue here is that you have no way of fixing this on your own, none. Once again, the power comes from outside of you. So your only option for salvation is to believe in some external unseen force for your salvation, and then you must uphold that belief until your death. And because we are these sinful creatures, we can never stop sinning. So we are trapped in this system of sinning and asking for forgiveness and sinning and asking for forgiveness. And honestly, you just basically end up hoping that you meet all the criteria for salvation because you can't get any direct feedback from God whether your salvation is really certain. I have to be honest about this and say that a lot of Christians claim to be certain about going to heaven, but the logic just doesn't hold up. Even though I would say that I was confident I was going to heaven, I still had doubts about whether or not I would be left behind in the rapture. This teaching leads to a cycle of shame and relief that keeps the most faithful Christians locked into that religion. If you have come from evangelical Christianity, I am sure you know exactly what I'm talking about when every year you would go to some type of Bible camp and raise your hand to rededicate your life to Christ. There's a lot of emotional turmoil that goes on in those circles that's really not talked about. But overall, we're taught that salvation is a free gift to all people, but it is certainly not free, and this is certainly not a gift. So what do we do? What do we do about this? Why is religious trauma such a big deal? Well, our culture assumes that religion is either harmless or relatively good for a person. As I touched on earlier, therapists are very aware of the benefits and protective factors that come from religion. But those therapists and mental health practitioners who are not familiar with the impacts of fundamentalism might assume that losing belief just means you've stopped practicing your religion and you kind of just move on. They might assume that some beliefs are just grown out of and it's just not really that big of a deal. But people who have not experienced this kind of indoctrination and who have not been trained or educated on religious trauma won't recognize how abusive it is. There are also some people who may not recognize that what they experienced in that religious group was trauma. They might just be thinking that those were normal experiences, but wonder why they have such a hard time adjusting. So for these reasons and more, I believe it is so important that we spread awareness of religious trauma syndrome and we have conversations about the harm done in spiritual and religious circles. Now, if you are someone who resonates with the things I brought up in this video, my recommendation is that you talk to a professional, myself or someone else about these issues as soon as you can. If you can't do that, look into some support groups on the internet and just start reflecting and sharing your experience. You can also check out the website journeyfree.org. I will put a link to that in the description for more information and resources. And this is the website that I used to gather a ton of research for this video. If you want to know more about what steps you can take to heal religious trauma on your own, stay tuned for the next video where I'll be talking all about how to heal religious trauma. Thank you so much for watching and getting to the end of the video. I really appreciate you. I wish you a ton of peace and love. I will see you next time.